The High Court annuls 2011 Kings Park District Council election result. Xi Jinping arrives in Moscow on his first state visit as president. And Obama says Jewish settlement activity hinders Mideast peace process.
Good evening. The High Court has annulled the 2011 District Election Council results. The court found Councillor Edward Leung, who beat his rival by just 2 votes, had breached regulations during the election. A by-election will now be called for Kings Park constituency in the Yau Tsim Mong district. Etienne Lamy-Smith reports.
High Court Judge Johnson Lam ruled that Edward Leung had breached election rules by publishing the names of 52 of his supporters without submitting their written consent to authorities beforehand. The judge said that illegal behaviour amounting to electoral fraud is unacceptable in a fair and impartial election, and that the court should take a tough stance on such behaviour. He said that even if people had verbally supported Leung, that wasn't the same as agreeing to their names being used for publicity. Justice Lam said that the voters could have been misled when comparing the candidates' support. Leung was upset with the ruling, which he called unfair. He maintained he had verbal consent beforehand and he never misled voters.
Afterwards, I was advised by the ICAC to contact all the supporters for their written declaration. And I was really successful to contact them all, confirming their support and letting me to use the name in my publicity materials.
Leung said he is probably the only victim in this case and that this may be the end of his political career. Rival Lam Kin Man, who brought the case to court, arguing that Leung had an unfair advantage by listing influential supporters, said that he is happy with the ruling and that it's been a long time coming. Lam said he may run again in the resulting by-election, but his party, the Association for Democracy and People's Livelihood, would make the final decision. While the court annulled the election results, it's now up to the Director of Public Prosecutions to decide whether Leung will face any criminal charges. Etienne Lamy-Smith, TVB News.
The Hong Kong Institute of Education has finally appointed a new president, former business school dean at Baptist University, Stephen Cheung.
The new Hong Kong IED president said today his #1 priority is to help the institution gain university status.
I'm confident that Hong Kong IED could become a university. When you look at the quality of research and teaching, it has a team and a good international standard and is equivalent to a university. So in my view, it's just a matter of time.
Stephen Cheung assumed the role of the 5th president of Hong Kong IED, replacing Anthony Cheung, who left the institute last summer to join the government as Secretary for Transport and Housing. On criticisms that the former business school dean and professor of finance at Baptist University may not be qualified for the position as he has no prior experience in teacher training, Cheung insists he has acquired a good amount of experience in his 20 years of teaching.
I have been the dean of the business school of Baptist University for the past 4 years, and we have done as a dean, we have done a lot of work in terms of improving teaching and research quality of the business school.
Cheung didn't shy away from controversial subjects such as the national education curriculum, which was criticised as a government attempt to brainwash students into patriotism. He said instead of national education, he wants students to be taught more Chinese culture and history so they can decide for themselves what to learn from the country's past. And he got emotional in describing his reaction to the news of the Tiananmen crackdown in 1989. He said he wept and thought about emigrating back then, and he still thinks the deployment of army tanks during the student protests is unacceptable.
2 domestic helpers at the centre of a case involving the killing of a man with Down syndrome appeared at the Eastern Magistracy today. The 2 women, aged 40 and 70 years old, face 1 charge of manslaughter. In court today, the prosecution said that the younger maid told police that it was the 70-year-old who told her to use string to tie up the man who was found dead in the bathroom. He had been under the care of the domestic helpers. After consideration, the magistrate decided that the 40-year-old helper should remain detained. The 70-year-old was released on bail. The case has been adjourned until May 16th.
President Xi Jinping has arrived in Moscow on his first state visit as president. He will stay in the Russian capital for 3 days on the first leg of a four-nation tour. The trip will also take him to Tanzania, South Africa, and the Republic of Congo. The president will attend a summit of the BRICS bloc, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, during his stop in the South African port city of Durban. While in Moscow, Xi will have talks with Russian leaders on a range of topics. Andrew Lau files his report from Moscow.
Xi Jinping has chosen Moscow as the first stop of his first foreign visit as president. Traditionally, the presidents of China and Russia will visit each other's capital on their first state visit. In 2003, former President Hu Jintao also paid a visit to Moscow, and last year Vladimir Putin visited Beijing after he was elected president. The Foreign Ministry says President Xi will have talks with Putin and Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev on ways to strengthen the two countries' cooperation in energy and aviation sectors. Political analyst Johnny Lau believes the two sides will also discuss ways to counter the U.S. return to Asia policy. He says there has been friction between Washington and Moscow over Central and Eastern Europe in recent years, and the U.S. has set up military cooperation arrangements with some former Warsaw Pact countries. Russia feels uneasy about this, Lau says, and is keen to strengthen cooperation with China to counter Washington's global strategy and its return to Asia policy.
Although Xi Jinping is only staying in Moscow for about a day and a half, he will attend about 20 events. Besides meeting with state leaders, he will also attend a series of cultural exchanges. Analysts say Xi is trying to change the world's impression on Chinese leaders to show that he is open and transparent when it comes to foreign policy. Andrew Lau, TVB News, Moscow, Russia.
U.S. President Barack Obama is in Jordan for talks with the country's king, a meeting which is expected to focus on the civil war in neighboring Syria. Last night, Obama delivered his keynote speech urging Israel and the Palestinians to return to talks to find a two-state solution. Tony Sabine reports.
Not everyone was happy U.S. President Barack Obama was going to Jordan today on day 3 of his Mideast trip. These communist protesters condemned Obama's visit as nothing more than a show of support for Israel at the expense of its Arab neighbors. Jordan is one of only 2 Arab states that have signed a peace treaty with Israel and is seen as an important player in any future two-state solution between the Jewish state and the Palestinians. Despite some trouble with his limousine earlier, which reportedly broke down after using the wrong fuel, Obama delivered his showcase speech in Jerusalem to Israeli students. He called on both sides to return to peace talks, appealing to Israelis to put themselves in the shoes of Palestinians and recognize Jewish settlement activity only hindered a solution.
Israelis must recognize that continued settlement activity is counterproductive to the cause of peace, and that an independent Palestine must be viable with real borders that have to be drawn.
But Obama also stressed Israel's Arab neighbors needed to let go of old prejudices if peace was to be achieved.
Arab states must adapt to a world that has changed. The days when they could condemn Israel to distract their people from a lack of opportunity or government corruption or mismanagement, those days need to be over. Now's the time for the Arab world to take steps towards normalizing relations with Israel.
Iran and Syria also featured, with Obama promising Tehran would never get its hands on nuclear weapons, while warning Syria against using its stockpile of chemical weapons. And he even laughed off a heckler in the audience.
I have to say we actually arranged for that because it made me feel at home.
Tony Sabine, TVB News.
The European Union has given Cyprus until Monday to raise the billions of euros it needs to secure an international bailout. Failure could trigger a collapse of the island's financial system and a swift exit from the Eurozone. And NSI Nicosia is preparing for the worst. The government is seeking powers to impose capital controls to prevent a flood of funds leaving the country when banks reopen next week. Chris Gelkin reports.
Another day of protests in Cyprus today by employees of the troubled Cypriot Laiki Bank. Party leaders are trying to enact 3 new laws that will impose tough new restrictions on bank transfers and a restructuring of the island's second largest lender. Employees of the Laiki Bank are worried that the government will allow the bank to fail in an attempt to contain the crisis.
The whole system is collapsing, and today it's the Cyprus Popular Bank, and tomorrow is the rest of the banks. And if the banks collapse, the whole Cyprus, everything collapses.
The European Central Bank has kept Cypriot banks operating through a liquidity lifeline. But if no deal is reached by Monday, even those funds would be cut off. Analysts say that would force the island's biggest banks to collapse. In turn, that would lead to a probable abandoning of the euro and a return to a significantly devalued local currency. Essentially, that would wipe out the large deposits the banks have been seeking to protect. This has led to long lines at ATM machines, with residents withdrawing what little cash is being made available. Analysts say what happens next week when the banks open again, deal or no deal, is anyone's guess. About a third of the 68 billion euros of deposits in Cypriot banks are of Russian origin. Finance Minister Michalis Saris has been in Moscow seeking to forge a deal. While the Russians have ruled out a direct loan, there is talk of some form of investment. And all eyes are now on unexploited offshore gas reserves. One industry expert says Russian gas giant Gazprom could see the island's troubles as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
If they sell it at the moment, it will be a fire sale. It will be very, very cheap. So they may actually regret in 10 years that they have sold it to Gazprom.
But there's a problem. Turkey, which controls the northern half of the island, does not recognize the Cyprus Republic. And Ankara has said it will block any attempts by Nicosia to exploit the reserves before a political solution is found on the island, divided since a 1974 war. Chris Galkin, TVB News.
And still ahead in the news. Measures to solve North District school place shortage problem. Images from space challenge the Big Bang Theory. And Rugby Sevens kicks off.